Good morning. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee meeting. And I want to thank my colleagues, Council Members O'Farrell and Rue, for being here as well. I did get notification from the other two members that they are on their way. There were multiple accidents on various freeways today. I can attest to that as well. So I want to thank all the other folks for being here as well. We've got a number of items that I'm going to consider for consent. Now, I know there are some folks that had public comment cards that are filled out. I want to thank Councilwoman Rodriguez for being here as well. There are a number of comment cards that people filled out on various items. If you would like to speak on those after I let you know what items that I'd like to consider consent meaning that we're going to approve them as written, as presented, and send them to the City Council because we have other items as well for discussion. You can still speak before we vote. That's your right. But there are a number of items that we'd like to just move forward on consent without discussion. But we can discuss those if you'd like. Since you're here, we could certainly do that as well. The items that I would like to consider for consent are items 1, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Mr. Chair, could I pull 5?
Pull number 5? Okay. So we'll call 5 special per council member Rue. 1, 6, 7, and 8.
Mr. Chair, you do have cards.
I know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll get to those. I mentioned that we have cards. So thank you. I appreciate that. So we're not voting on them yet. So 1, 6, 7, and 8 for consent. We have no objection and no other items for special other than 5. But we do have some cards on items 1. Only on item 1. And items 1, 3, 5, and 8 for Mr. Previn. And Armando Herman on every single item. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to turn to the cards on those items for which we have first Mr. Previn. We're going to hold general public comment till the end of the meeting, but if you want to go ahead and come on up for your 2 minutes on items 1, 3, 5, and 8. And speak to only those items, please, or you'll forfeit your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Eric Previn from Studio City in the 2nd District. And the first item, I'm pleased to see there's going to be some outreach in gun stores, or at least there's a proposal, and firing ranges for mental health. And I thought I would bring along a couple of examples that you can pick up from the County Department of Mental Health. They provide them at meetings. And I think that I looked at the one on depression. It's a useful guide, and it's very helpful. So I think that would be useful for the group. Item number 3 is, I have to comment because it's the LAPD's report on violence at First Amendment events nationwide. And whereas the LAPD is excellent when it comes to crowd control and various activities like that, when it comes to respecting speech in the First Amendment, obviously they're legendarily bad, as we know. Here at City Hall, there are multiple efforts to create a trespassing rule for speakers. And whereas I do not sanction effusive use of expletives or other kind of conduct like that during meetings, I do feel that people are entitled to address items that appear on the agenda, and I'm very upset that the leadership at City Hall has restricted that, often through this game of committee work. Item number 5 is the important ruse working on the neighborhood. I'll come back, maybe speak in my public comment after I hear. But noise in the neighborhood. But item number 8, sir, I have to address you directly because I'm a little concerned. It's a donation of $70,000 worth of vans from Galpin Ford. When I just scanned to see who, at first I didn't see it was Galpin, then I saw it's Galpin, but I saw not only is it Galpin, the name on it is Phil Englander. So I don't know if that's a relation or not. And of course, there's nothing necessarily untoward about that, but it certainly raises some questions because the discrepancy I found is that they're declaring a $72,900 gift or actually that's what the invoices say, but it's only marked as a $70. So there's a $2,000 spread. Far be it from me to suggest any wrongdoing there, but I must tell you, it is a surprise. And I think that Mr. Englander's moved on.
Thank you very much. And, typically I won't even respond, particularly to Mr. Previn, who fills out a card on every single item, usually in every single committee and council, but I will on that accusation. Phil Englander's never, ever been any relation to me whatsoever. Doesn't even work at Galpin anymore, but appreciate you doing your homework and reading the reports, Mr. Previn. With that, we'll go ahead and take the cards then from Mr. Herman. Again, I'll remind you not to yell into the microphone. It's keep your items pertaining to the subject matters only for 2 minutes.
We all know what preventive suicide is, right? It's called depression. People who suffer depression can be in 4 categories: mild, to moderate, to severe, to extreme. And I haven't reached my extreme depression yet, Mr. T. Fank, for the record. After all, it is Steve Soboroff who calls me bipolar, maniac, psychotic. But I'm not. I'm like the rest of you psychotic people here. So I'm not the one, after all, on item 8 now, going around the Harbor Division cadet programs fucking young 15-year-old kids. That's extreme. Then on item number 7, if we have alcohol and drug impaired driving, we should think about what that one police officer did driving in the wrong direction, killing 3 people, when all he had to do was pick up the phone. Mr. Herman, would you please pick me up? I'm a little over the intoxicated level. Sure, sir. Sorry to hear that. I usually drink at home when I'm going to get fucked up. That way I'm safe. But yeah, I'll pick you up right now. So that's all it takes, gentlemen. Uber, taxi, call me anytime. I don't sleep but 3 hours. The devil never rests. And I go into item number 2 regarding motion of Ms. Rodriguez, Los Angeles Police Department and Fire Department, regarding what? Public Works of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation to prepare a presentation of the city's response to Latuna fire. Well, did we not learn from the Anaheim fire recently in the news? Apparently not. We need to clean up those hillsides, more so out there in that area, Latuna Canyon. It's an embarrassment to all of us. Homeless encampments, debris and trash, overgrown vegetation. We don't have a maintenance for tree trimming. That's embarrassing. Thank you.
So that concludes all the comment cards on items 6, 7, and 8. So we'll go ahead and move those without objection. That'll be the order. Thank you very much. Ready to move item 1, except we have a number of cards on those if you wish to speak. If not, we can go ahead and vote and move it to council, but I'll call you up anyway, since you're here, and I appreciate you being here. Holly Dexter, did you wish to speak for your minute? Come on up. Karen Nash, if you wish to speak. Margaret Bennett. Ann Lane. And apologize, I'm trying to read the writing on this. Mr. and Mrs. DuPont, it looks like. Mr. DuPont. Couldn't read the first name, so I apologize. Couldn't make it that up. And if you could just, before you speak, just state your name for the record, and thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, Holly Dexter. I'm one of your constituents, Mr. Englander. I've met with you several times, so thank you for letting this proceed to a vote. I appreciate it. When I was 14 years old, I witnessed my neighbor commit suicide by gun in front of my house. I watched him die on my front lawn. He was depressed over a girlfriend breaking up with him. And I know that had he attempted suicide a different way, he, probably 90% chance he would have survived and gone on to get help. I appreciate you taking a look at this issue, because I think we've proven in California that we have very strong gun laws. In Los Angeles, I think we have some of the strongest gun laws in the nation, and we haven't infringed on anyone's Second Amendment rights, and we've proven that it can work, and this is just about saving lives, so thank you.
Thank you for being here. Good
My
morning.
name is Margot Bennett, and I'm the Executive Director of Women Against Gun Violence. Thank you for allowing us to speak before you.
Yes.
Over 30,000 deaths each year are due to gun violence, and 2/3 of those are suicide. In 2015, one of those deaths was my friend, Susan. And I think if she had had an opportunity to see something that made her think about suicide prevention, it would have helped. Do I know for certain? No, I don't. Just like I don't know whether somebody is always going to stop at a stop sign. But she would have had 3 opportunities to see suicide prevention information: when she purchased the gun, when she picked up the gun, when she went to the range to learn how to shoot. And so I thank you very much for passing this through to the City Council. I think we can really make a difference here.
Thank you.
My name is Norm DuPont. I'm also with Women Against Gun Violence. I submitted for the record and would request it be incorporated in the record and support various scholarly articles that talk about the rate of suicides related to guns. There's a lot of controversy, I realize, about various statistics that are mentioned about gun and gun violence. But the one statistic that is very clear that I urge this committee to consider is that suicide rate and gun ownership is related. I quote from a professor from Ohio State University, not necessarily the most liberal university, quote, "There is reason to believe that high levels of gun ownership have increased the suicide rate substantially in the United States. There is a strong correlation between gun ownership and the suicide rate with firearms and no substitution effect. That is, you don't go from a gun to something else for suicide in most cases. There's ample evidence in the record we'd like you to consider."
Great. Thank you. Morning.
My name is Ann Rice Lane. I'm a founder of Women Against Gun Violence 25 years ago. We've been working on this issue in many, many ways for many, many years. I have a personal experience. My son was 29 years old, despairing, and fortunately there was no gun in the house, but he found a razor blade and slit his wrist, and he survived. And that's the difference. So I am very grateful for your taking up this recommendation for posting suicide information. We don't know how many people will be helped, but we can only hope that they will see the information and change their behavior. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Karen Nash, did you still wish to speak? No? Okay. All right, colleagues, we'd like to go ahead and move that on to the council without objection? Absolutely. Okay, that'll be the order. Thank you. That's approved. Next item, let's go ahead and turn to item 5, called special by Councilmember Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for your continued support on this process. And I really want to thank the City Attorney and the LAPD for their input and guidance throughout this process. These parties overcrowd residential streets and pose significant risk to our public safety. All-night parties with hundreds of guests crowding narrow streets and the hillsides, blocking the right-of-way for emergency vehicles, increasing the threat of wildlife. They also consume the time and resources of our police officers who, when, if present, have no recourse to actually solve the problem. So our police department should not be tasked with breaking up these nuisances every weekend with no recourse to resolve these problems. That's what this ordinance in front of us intends to do. And this ordinance would allow for escalating fines and penalties against both the tenant and the homeowner, ensuring that the party houses do not disturb and threaten the public safety of everyone around them. And Mr. Chair, I'd also like to introduce an amendment to the ordinance.
Okay.
And I move that to amend Section H of the draft ordinance under consideration to read, an owner and/or responsible parties issued a citation in violation of subsection B of this section shall be subject to the following fines. A, an administrative fine of $100 for the first violation. Then subsequently, you should continue to read an administrative fine of $500 for the second violation, and so forth, third, fourth.
Are you going to go to 5th then?
Yes.
Okay, so
I'm just adding one more in the beginning for $100 for equity.
So, and then the
issue.
same, well, it'll be the $100, the $500, the $1,000, the $2,000, and the $4,000.
Yes.
Got
The
it.
4,000 would be the fifth violation.
Okay. question, Mr. Rue, and it may be one for our city attorney, but you may know the answer to this since I know you've done a lot of work on this. It states in the ordinance that the recipient of this ticket, citation, shall post the notification on their dwelling in a visible place outside for 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
I think it says something like that.
Yes.
Is there a fine or a fee if they remove it and don't? So, in other words, they have another issue that drives out law enforcement or an enforcement officer the following week or within that 30 days, and they no longer have it posted.
Yes.
Is that some other type of fine or fee?
Good morning, council members. David Michelson and also Heather Aubrey with the City Attorney's Office. Pleasure to be here today. The draft ordinance does indeed require that the enforcement officer post for 30 days the required notice. If it were to be removed prior to 30 days and the individual was caught who was doing that removal, there is a penalty for doing that. And I believe it's $500 as currently written. Yes, that's correct. So if someone were to remove it sooner than the 30 days that's required for posting, it's a $500 sanction. Fine.
Isn't there also a misdemeanor? You could also, I think the ordinance says.
So under the ordinance, and again, we were asked to, by City Council, model as close as we could the Newport Beach ordinance, and we've done that with some exceptions and modifications. But to answer your question, the ordinance does allow the prosecutors in the City Attorney's Office to, instead of pursuing the A citation process, to instead file a misdemeanor charge. So if someone is really flagrantly violating this law and does it repeatedly, the prosecutors in our office could actually then pursue a criminal sanction, which would be a misdemeanor, versus the A citation program, administrative citation, which of course is strictly civil. So if someone were to violate either Section B or Section D, they're set up for A citations, but again, in our office, depending on how egregious the situation is, criminal prosecution could be pursued.
Got it. It is fascinating. I mean, I don't recall having any type of required 30-day posting on an ACE or a violation, and I think it's creative. I like it. I mean, one question, too, then, and I'm not sure if this is in the ordinance, if they violate the fact that they don't have it posted for 30 days, does then the clock start over again? And should it?
That's a good question. I don't know if it's set up currently to start over again.
Can we add that?
Yes, I think we can add that, and we will add that. I will also say that
Sounds good.
this is an A citation that relates to an occurrence or a violation that occurs on property. So the 30-day posting accomplishes a number of things. One, it provides additional notice to owners.
I get it. Anybody showing up at the property, any other law enforcement, anybody.
The vacant owner, they're going to have now plenty of notice to know what's going on. Yeah.
So I like it. Yeah. Colleagues, anything else on this? Oh, great.
Quick question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to commend Mr. Rue for this new ordinance. I think it's needed. And it's not just party houses in the Hollywood Hills. Los Angeles is a very noisy city. We have big blowout parties in many neighborhoods out of nowhere, including in my own community sometimes. Question, does this ordinance address amplified sound, or does it even need to? I think for an amplified sound, perhaps you have to get a permit for that anyway. We have bands that set up and blast into the neighborhood sometimes.
Heather Aubrey, to respond to your question, Councilman, the loud or unruly conduct definition specifically encompasses loud noise, and as with all of the conduct that constitutes loud or unruly conduct, it must be unlawful under either local or state law. So in fact, the LAMC does have provisions that prohibit amplified noise, loud noise, so that's captured in a provision of the ordinance.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move it with the amendments, 2 amendments. One was on H with the first fine being $100 and then rolling all the way up with 5 levels of up to $4,000 as indicated. And then the second with the clock starting over if they're in violation of the 30-day posting. And then if I can ask the City Attorney's Office and Mr. Rue's office that have worked so closely on this to come up with other suggestions, not part of this it's not a amendment, but just to come up with other suggestions, particularly on the ACE citation program, of where it would make sense to have this 30-day posting, because I think that's it's interesting. I don't remember us doing that anywhere else, and I think there's a lot of merit to that, so it's creative. So thank you for that. It's great. Okay, we'll go ahead and move it as amended.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, one thing about the posting, we didn't want to be too prescriptive to the city attorney, but if the posting could be as large as possible, that would be.
I would suggest this. When this comes to council, can you come back with a framework of what the posting shall be? And maybe it's that we're the ones that give them the actual 8.5 by 11 red card, or whatever you
Or
suggest
large,
should
yeah.
be. Banner, no, whatever, in neon, whatever you suggest should be, we come back with those recommendations.
We'd
when
be
it comes
pleased to do that. I'll note that in the current draft of the ordinance, it's relatively specific as to the contents of the notice, because it is a city-produced document that then will have to be posted and remain up. But in terms of size, that's not addressed, so we will address that.
And color. I mean, for instance,
Right.
we do have that in, like when we red tag
Yeah.
something, we do have specifications on that, and so maybe we can, and the location of where it's, I'm assuming it's got to be visible from the point of entry, of the main point of entry, and if that's all in there, if it's not, to make sure you have
Right.
include
We'll work with
some of that.
LAPD on all three
Great.
of those items.
I mean, somebody posts it in their backyard, it's mildly interesting, right? So, okay. Thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. So that's approved with the amendments. We'll go ahead and hear item 2 next. This is a motion relative to instructing the fire department with the assistance of LAPD, EMD, DPW, and LADOT to prepare present city response to the Latuna fire, the evacuation process, and the affected area impacts on the public infrastructure and other relevant issues. And thank you all for being here. Before you start off, I would like to turn it over to Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. Colleagues, many of you are aware that just a few weeks ago we had the largest fire in the city's history, all contained in my district, and then beyond the city of Los Angeles into the Glendale and Burbank areas. And, it was remarkable. The response, the unified front that we had operating on the front lines to help combat this fire in such a remarkable way, an outstanding way. And I think when we consider what's happening statewide, it's even more incredible to really reflect on the effort that we had deployed here in really mitigating significant losses. So it's a testament to the work that everyone did. But the reason for the report was I think there's always an opportunity for us to reflect on what we could have perhaps coordinated better. And I wanted to really bring everybody together. And I want to say that I know we have helped to ignite, pun intended, a conversation post-fire with our county and our state officials to really reflect on all the various efforts that we've deployed. So I've asked for a report back and understanding what we've completed to date and what we will continue to do going forward. So I'd like to start off with Chief Richmond.
Thank you, Council Member. Honorable Council Members, Deputy Chief Trevor Richmond, Operations Valley Bureau. I was the Deputy Department Commander in charge of the Latuna brush fire and oversaw all fire department operations for the duration of the incident. I'd like to give you just a very brief summary of how the event unfolded over the first several days. Fire started on September 1st at about 1:30 in the afternoon. First arriving companies on scene found about a quarter acre of brush burning on the north side of Latuna Canyon Boulevard. They made an aggressive attack on the flanks of the fire and proceeded to put hose lines around the perimeter to attempt to stop the forward spread of the fire. There were thunderstorms in the adjacent foothills. We had expected that we might see a thunderstorm downdraft on this particular incident, and we did. That thunderstorm downdraft produced winds up to 25 to 30 miles an hour, basically out of nowhere. And it proceeded to spread the fire in a 360-degree pattern. And the first arriving companies had to retreat to a position of safety. At approximately 2:21 in the afternoon, the Latuna brush fire jumped the 210 freeway and proceeded to head towards the Sunland area. It was at that time we realized that we were in for an extended operation and proceeded to order the appropriate resources to begin to build a incident command structure to manage the incident. We co-located with the Los Angeles Police Department and proceeded to evaluate the evacuation considerations for this particular incident. With our co-location with LAPD, we designated an evacuation branch within Incident Command and proceeded to identify those areas that were at most danger during the spread of the fire. There were evacuations that were made that night, primarily by LAPD and fire department, door-to-door knocking and just letting the people in the neighborhood know through a public address system that the fire was moving towards their area. Over the course of the incident, unfortunately, there were 5 residential structures that were lost. There were also 5 outbuildings, as well as a number of private vehicles at those residences. There were a total of 11 firefighter injuries, mostly related to heat. If you recall, that was a significant heat wave over the Labor Day weekend that we were experiencing. The total acreage that burned, including the cities of Burbank and Glendale, was 7,194 acres. At the height of the incident, we had just shy of 1,300 fire personnel operating at the incident from a variety of different fire agencies around the state of California. The command posture for this incident was unified command with LAPD, Glendale Fire, and Burbank Fire, with an assistance from LA County and incident support. The cause of the fire, as of this morning, and I checked, is still under investigation at this time. There were no witnesses to the incipient stages of the fire. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to have Deputy Chief John Sherman from LAPD, my counterpart, discuss LAPD's actions at the incident.
Good morning. I'm Deputy Chief John Sherman, the Commanding Officer of Operations Valley Bureau, and I responded to the fire at about 3 o'clock that afternoon and assumed a unified command with the fire department on behalf of the police department. I'd like to just give you a brief overview this morning relative to the police department's obligations and our response that day or that weekend, and we assume incident command with the fire department, assist with traffic, evacuation processes, and security relative to any needs within the fire. Specifically, relative to traffic that weekend, it was a holiday Friday, which is a significant traffic issue in Los Angeles, and immediately the 210 freeway was closed, as well as Latuna Canyon, major thoroughfares for the San Fernando Valley. We had the CHP on scene immediately with us, assisting in getting the freeway cleared, stopped and cleared. And we also had the LA DOT with us at scene, supervisory personnel as well as field personnel, and working and moving traffic along on the surface streets. The freeway was cleared by about, I believe it was 5 or 6 o'clock that evening. We had all the vehicles off the freeway. We had significant traffic on Foothill Boulevard that was moving. And it was very, very congested due to that was the main thoroughfare for people moving around the area. As to the evacuation group, that evening there were 2 small communities, Reverie Canyon and Haynes Canyon, that were evacuated by the police department, and we posted security personnel in both those communities and provided those 2 services to those 2 areas. We assisted with identifying, as part of the evacuation group, identifying evacuation and shelter locations for animals and people. We first had a high school, and then we changed that to a recreation center a little later in the evening for the duration of the fire. And then the animals were evacuated to the Hanson Dam area. As to the security, what we did for the duration of the event was we provided security for the command post operations, which was obviously very large during the fire. And then also there were, during the the rest of the weekend, there were several other small communities that were evacuated, and we provided security throughout the weekend to those residential areas that were evacuated. In total, we evacuated 5 general communities, and approximately 180 homes were evacuated, either voluntary or mandatory during the weekend. What I'd like to do now is let Mr. Freeman talk about other aspects relative to, I think, the recovery primarily.
Good morning, council members. Robert Freeman, Assistant General Manager for the Emergency Management Department. We did provide some interagency coordination support during the response phase to ensure that the Animal Services Department, Recreation and Parks, American Red Cross, other partners that help out with this shelter operation was effective. I would mention that one of the innovative things we did is Recreation and Parks made the Lakeview Terrace Recreation Center available as a first responder shelter. We had a large number of personnel, as Chief Richmond was mentioning. The conditions out in the field were extreme in terms of the heat. So we were very thankful that Recreation and Parks not only provided shelter for the residents that were evacuated, but also for the first responders as well. But as Chief Sherman mentioned, our focus has been moving forward, looking at the mitigation aspects and recovery aspects of the fire. As I'm sure you're familiar, the cycle of disasters in Southern California is often fires followed by rains or floods. So that the burn area is at great risk of mudslides or other debris flows. In fact, even during the response phase, we thank the Department of Transportation and the Department of Public Works for their efforts to install K-rail to mitigate some debris flows that were already happening in dry conditions along Latuna Canyon Road. So we put forward an interdepartmental, interagency effort to study the situation and identify what mitigation steps need to be taken, including looking at some possible funding sources. So to that end, EMD is chairing an interagency Latuna Fire Burn Area Mitigation Task Force. We've already held our first meeting. We've done this in close cooperation with Councilmember Rodriguez's office and the Mayor's office to ensure that our elected officials are informed. We are also working very closely with our partners with the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works. They're already initiating a series of mitigation efforts, including removing material out of these debris catch basins. There are 2 debris catch basins that the county supports that are in the city of Los Angeles, and we're coordinating with them on access and notifying residents that trucks will be coming down your street to remove the debris. This is a mitigation effort to ensure that those basins can function properly during a storm situation. We work closely with the Weather Service to monitor what's heading our way. Remains to be seen what the long-term forecast is. But as we learned in our preparation for the El Nino storm a couple of years ago and then all the rain that we had this last year, getting out ahead of these things, particularly for the public, is very, very important. So the task force will continue to meet to coordinate efforts. They've identified some areas that they know to be at risk. The county, within the next week or 2, will release a detailed set of surveys and maps that they're going to provide to all of our agencies so that we know under certain weather conditions, here's the areas of the community that would be affected. And those, in fact, are maps that would help us to order evacuations for potentially a large area, perhaps larger than the fire. So we're working closely with all of our partners. We've also reached out to the National Resources Conservation Service. This is a federal agency that administers an emergency watershed protection program, and it can provide reimbursement up to 75% of total cost to local jurisdictions. So we've indicated our notice of interest, and we'll be working with that agency to specify the kind of mitigation work that we envision. So whether it's installing additional K-rails or additional work with timber and support structures that were damaged, that's the work ahead of us this month, is to identify the specific measures that need to be taken, coordinate that amongst the different public works bureaus as well as transportation, and get the information then out to the residents. To that end, we are proposing a similar strategy as we did with El Nino to work with Councilmember Rodriguez, the Mayor's office, and other council offices to host a town hall meeting or meetings that will provide an opportunity to get information out to residents, have presentations by some of the agencies that have a big stake in it, make sure people understand what they can do. Some of this information is already available on websites and social media sites, so we're leveraging some information that the county has already distributed and making sure that we have a consistent message. So PIOs from police, fire, public works, EMD, we're working together with the council office to make sure that we get information out now, but look to have a town hall meeting in advance of the winter rains.
Thank you. Okay. I wanted to add something if I could. First of all, there's been a lot going on lately with not just fires, but dramatic first responders responding to major events. And they all have just done a phenomenal job. And the stories that have come out of heroism, and but it's not just our first responders and the volunteers that have come out. I'm reading a lot of the stories that came out of the Latuna Canyon fires about all the neighbors helping each other, the evacuations of large animals and horses, canceling events to open up facilities without any question, and then people bringing supplies to help everyone. It's extraordinary that it's easy to get lost in the frustration every day that we deal with in the day-to-day communities. We see the crises we're dealing with in all of our communities, from our transient mental health issues and a lot of community members really frustrated over a lot of the issues we're dealing with every single day. And then it's events like this that we're faced with that really puts things into check, that really shows what leadership is all about, not just from the volunteers on the ground, but a new minted council member who was literally thrown into the fire and had to figure out immediately what to do, who to communicate with, how to disseminate information, despite her chief of staff, but all her rest of her staff doing a great job. And just so I want to say thank you to all of you for tremendous efforts that continue to make this city shine, of showing that we are the example, that we do more with less than anybody, as large as we are, and to the men and women who have always and continue to step up, including our police officers and firefighters, but VST, CEMP, all of our volunteers, our CERT team, our crisis response team. We have more cadres of volunteers from neighborhood councils to people that just drop everything at a moment's notice to rush towards danger and help strangers. And that's what it really truly means to be twice a citizen. So I appreciate all the work. I have one small, tiny little recommendation that I'd like to throw out there for consideration. And that is that there's a spot on the 210 right at Latuna that absolutely has no cell service of any carrier whatsoever. We all know the spot.
Mr. Chair, I've got it handled.
Okay. This has been, I had one time years ago, out of frustration and concern for others, thought about moving into this district to run to get the cell site there. But we've never had a cell site there, and we have a new council member who is actually already on it, which is awesome. So thank you for that. We all know the spot.
Yes,
all right.
we do.
Thank you, everybody, for all your tremendous efforts. We'll go ahead and receive and file this.
Well,
Send it on to
actually,
council. Do you have recommendations as well?
I do have some
questions.
questions.
Okay, great.
I do have some questions. My apologies. And I just wanted to, again, thank you all for all of your work, at the command post, during the event, and post the event. I mean, it's really been a reflection of, to your point, Mr. Chair, all the incredible talent that we have and doing what we do best in times of emergencies. But I did have some questions, particularly as it related to, I know the debris basins that we were talking about. We are anticipating, and I know I did a flyover with LAFD to reflect on the topography of the area and where we potentially might be more vulnerable. Have we gotten a report back yet from BOE to further identify some of those most vulnerable locations. I know that they were in the process of doing that.
BOE has provided us with a preliminary report that addresses some of these areas. The report that's coming from the county will be a comprehensive one, but that's also a charge for our task forces to make sure that we have the proper analysis that's actually needed in order to prioritize what mitigation work might need to be done, what the options would be.
And given what we might project in terms of potential slides in the area, we do so much in the way of alerting our residents as it relates to high fire warnings, high fire danger season, correct? Have we considered or have you looked at perhaps doing in the same way that we have like the red flag warnings, something that would potentially notify our residents in advance, particularly those that are most vulnerable in advance of this so that they can, for example, not put their trash cans out or not have their vehicles in a way that would potentially, should there be a slide, create more of a challenge in these areas? Have you considered that, or can you look into perhaps doing an early notification system in that same way?
Absolutely, and we have such a system in place. It's called Notify LA, and we've already been discussing internally with our partners in law and fire service about some structured testing in the area so that the residents become familiar with this application, and that's an application that stands at the ready to provide residents with advanced warning, to order evacuations, and provide information as to shelter locations or other directions that can be given both ahead of time and real time. The important part is to perform some of these tests and be certain of how the system can be used precisely. The system has been used on a number of incidents, including the Cahuenga brush fire. It proven to be effective, and we're looking for this as a weather notification system that's in place and will be tested and ready to go.
On the Notify LA, what is the protocol for that being activated?
Well, right now, LAPD and EMD have staff that are trained in how to execute a notification. The fire department can provide us with the information necessary, and we can go ahead and make the alert. We're also looking, frankly, for more opportunities to test the system so that people become familiar with this. The system provides us a database of approximately 1.7 million landline phones, but as we know, less and less people have home landline phones. So we have a campaign to encourage residents to sign up for Notify LA. So we're constantly marketing that. We have target goals set up. So this is a great opportunity to increase the signups in that area and get people an opportunity to see how the system works. And it's a system that can also tie us in not only to the cell service if you register, but it's a portal to the federal wireless emergency alert system. So in an extreme catastrophic event where we needed to alert anybody that's within a certain distance of an affected area, we can do the WIA alert, and every cell phone will get it, much like the Amber alerts that we receive. So we've got some capabilities, and this is a great opportunity for us to test and use them.
Thank you. And Chief, and thank you for that. And Chief, I had a question because you mentioned all the conditions related to traffic that day, or that weekend, rather, the fact that it was a holiday weekend, the fact that the 210 was closed. But I had a question because it was suggested, what was the purpose? I know we had motorcycle officers that were deployed. What was the purpose of deploying the motorcycle officers, and was it in any way related to traffic, or was it just part of our response?
I ordered up the motor officers. One of the first things I did when I arrived, and I did that because two reasons. The first being it took me quite a while to get up there, and I knew traffic would be real bad, and I thought it might take police officers and cars a lot longer to get there. And I figured the motor officers could get there a lot quicker if we needed to do mass rapid evacuation. So I did that just as a precaution to get them up into the area. And then the second reason was when we do have evacuations in the hills, where appropriate, evaluating the risk with the fire incident commander, our motor officers can get up into some of the canyon streets a lot easier than police cars to cause the evacuation. That evening, and to the best of my understanding, that whole weekend, we did not use motor officers for that purpose because they weren't needed. We had enough police cars that were present that handled the evacuations that occurred on Friday night.
Okay. And I wanted to ask, and I don't know if we have anyone here as well from Animal Services. Did we have?
Can you come up and if you're going to?
Because one of the unique circumstances, colleagues, that we had, and I know Councilmember Englander, you have this in your area, where you have a large equestrian community too. And I just had a question in terms of, our evacuation plans for large animals and equine. And, we opened up the facility at the Hanson Dam Equestrian Center. But I just wanted to kind of ascertain what how would we accelerate the deployment of evacuations as it relates to the equine in advance of, perhaps some of it just requires a lot more time to do those evacuations, and what are some of the mechanisms that we can coordinate in order to assure that that happens in advance of perhaps some of the other evacuations that transpire?
Right now, we're working together with EMD and Parks and Recreations, and also with some of the equine facilities to come up with a better plan, to have that in place. In this fire situation, a lot of people were self-evacuating themselves prior to opening up the facility. But we depend on the fire department to let us know as to which areas are being evacuated, so we know if there's more equines or other animals that need to come into the facilities. That's fine.
Terrific. Okay. Okay, well, I think I'm good with questions, but I would like to ask for a report back in 30 days, because I think this is going to be an ongoing process for us to continue to reflect and evaluate and what we can do in these coordinated efforts going forward. And I think there are going to be best practices that are going to be of benefit to not just many of our hillside communities, but when we talk about large-scale evacuations, things that we have to consider. So I wanted with specific respect to some of the efforts that we're doing with the Department of Public Works, how we're going to mitigate some of the hazards that the fires have caused, and also just whatever the protocols that we're going to have in place as it relates to Notify LA in terms of activating that system. I really would like to get more details in terms of what those triggers are going to be going forward, so that we have this seamless process. And happy to do all that I can to continue to help support and promote more people registering for Notify LA, because it is a very important tool that we have to assure that we can get the message out to many of our residents in the San Fernando Valley and citywide.
Okay, so what we can do, if you'd like, is we can ask the Department of Public Works to present a report from recommendations that you suggested and Notify LA on what those trigger points. Would you like to hold this in committee until those two reports are done?
That would be terrific.
So, okay, so the Department of Public Works, if they could come back with a report of best practices and what are some of their recommendations, and then also Notify LA on what are those trigger points. And we'll go ahead and move that without objection, but we'll keep it in committee for those two reports to come back. I'd like to also add to Notify LA that what we should do is send the information to each communication deputy in each council office for them to put up in their newsletters on their websites, for them to print out and bring to neighborhood council meetings and spread the word as well. And so if that could be sent on to not just links, but graphics that we can start pushing out on social media from all of us as well. I think collectively from all the offices, there's a big reach, and that would be very helpful. Might be something also for police and fire to start putting out on some of their social media efforts and some of the slows to promote when they're out speaking to folks as well and letting them know to sign up. So that'd be great.
Thank you.
Terrific. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. That'll be the order. Next, let's quickly go to item 4. So item 4, colleagues, was a motion that I put in instructing LADOT with the assistance of PD and FD and DWP to provide a report on the safety and traffic control measures in place during the July 8th receiving station, that fire in CD12 that left us with some large issues in terms of power issues, and we can be brief on this. I brought it here for a reason, a very, very specific reason. But if you can just address one particular issue, and thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Not only a receiving station that blew out well ahead of its shelf life, and we've already had reports from DWP of what occurred, and they're still under investigation as to why that receiving station actually, when it was already serviced, it was due for maintenance this year, but it wasn't overdue, and so we knew and appreciate DWP stepping forward and letting us know what happened there. We had, and the reason I brought you all here is the report back that we got was that with the various intersections being out, LA PD as well as DOT, well, PD had some issues that they brought to me that they could not get a hold of any supervisor. There was no supervisor actually on call or on duty when this occurred. And they needed DOT officers in an emergency situation to scramble up to and deploy to all the key intersections, particularly those in the high injury network where we had no traffic control devices. But according to LAPD and the reports back, they couldn't get a hold of anybody at DOT during the incident, and that there was no DOT supervisor scheduled to be even on call. And I don't know what those protocols, this is the first time I've ever heard that we didn't have supervisors either funded and or on call all the time, particularly for major events like this. And I just wanted to address that and ask for your suggestions if that was the case and what we need to do moving forward.
Sure. Good morning, council members. I'm Devin Farfan, Deputy Chief of Parking Enforcement. On the day in question, we did have an on-duty captain. We have one every weekend. We start Friday evening and they go through Monday morning. And they were in coordination with Chisa Valley as to the explosion that occurred. Approximately, we were notified that 700 intersections went dark when the fire first happened. And so knowing that and the time of day, for us, the time of day of week makes every difference as our staffing levels, as we cover 5 geographical areas, and we roughly have about 551 full-time officers at this time. And having said that, we are a 24/7 operation, and after 6 p.m., our resources dwindle down significantly. On this date, we had 4 resources available for traffic control related incidents, so we needed to keep coverage throughout the rest of the city. The duty captain was notified. Originally, we were notified that it was going to go through Monday, which would have been a problem for us due to the fact of peak hour. We do have protocols in place should something that occur, and the role of the duty captain is to notify our chief, who will in turn authorize callbacks.
Okay, so this is helpful, but let me ask you a question. I don't know if there's an action report from DOT on this, from what time the incident occurred to what time they were notified? And
we were notified. I do have that. We do keep, the duty captain does keep a duty log. He was actually notified at 1930 hours, which is 7:30 p.m., letting us know about what had occurred. They were requesting a supervisor to respond to the command post. We did not have a supervisor available to respond. We sent a lead officer to the command post, who in turn was relayed the information to the duty captain. The duty captain was going to be responding to the command post should the duration go on. Originally, we were told Monday, so in fact, they were authorized to report. However, we were notified at 21:30, which is 22:30, that the CP was going to be closing and they were no longer needed, and that the Monday duration was not going to occur. So we rely heavily on the law at hand, which states when the intersections go dark, it's a four-way stop. One of our protocols is to prioritize intersections, as we stated. So had we gone through the whole weekend and through Monday morning, our ATSAC center would have prioritized intersections for us so that we could be ready for peak hour traffic and to be able to deploy our officers in key locations, as you indicated earlier.
So
We do
why,
have a protocol.
why was it we didn't have a supervisor?
Well,
that-
as I mentioned earlier, it is common on the weekends where we have just a duty captain on duty because of resources. We have 68 traffic supervisors on duty, and we do a 24/7 operation. So because of vacations, in some cases, that's not always an option, but the duty captain is always available, and we can send folks in if something big happens. And we've done this under other emergency situations as Latuna. So when something big, anything 2 to 3 hours in duration, in most cases, by the time we get staff there, the event is over, which happened in this case. Our plan is to prioritize, we have a plan in place. We go on 12-hour shifts. Should something happen, we cancel
Sure.
days off. If we determine that it is a major issue, like we were prepared for El Nino,
Right.
the Northwest earthquake, we do have protocols in place for that.
If you could submit your report that you have in writing, that would be very helpful to review. And then any input from LAPD?
Sure.
On this?
Just briefly, we did set up a command post. We did send resources out to the DWP facility to assist them with lighting and assist the fire department at the actual emergency scene where the catalyst, all of this. Our function is in all of this is we want to be mobile. We want to maintain public order. We want to be seen out there by everyone within the affected zone, check critical sites, hospitals, schools, financial institutions, government buildings. So our only concern with the lack of tri-lights is just that motorists have an understanding of 21800 DCVC, which says in the event of power outages at tri-light signals, it becomes an automatic four-way stop. And we've been working with DOT to come up with some other types of measures. We've discussed getting cones out at the areas just to highlight that hey, this is an intersection and it's out. Maybe barricades with stop signs. They've come up with a priority list of intersections where we could start going down. And although we won't be manning these intersections as PD because we've got to concentrate on our other security issues within that zone, we could certainly help facilitate getting things like cones and barricades out there via escort. However, DOT needs us to provide actual traffic safety at these locations.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Well, I appreciate it. If you guys have anything to add, if not, we can go ahead and resume.
I would just like to add something because I think it gets forgotten in the overall scheme of the process. But prior to that explosion at RSJ, we were already at level 1 with over 40,000 customers out. So what regular forces would be on weekend duty were already taxed and working at other locations. So it really stretched all of our resources for that particular day, and it was an unusual day. So I think that had it not been for the fact that we were already at level 1 with as many people off, that it would have been a lot better as soon as the RSJ incident took place.
When you're at level 1, is that shared with all of the other departments to let them know?
Yes, to an extent, because everybody's involved anyways. Usually the FD's there, PD's there,
Sure.
DOT's there. We're all working together trying to mitigate as many.
But I mean, when you are on that, when you reach that low level of staffing, notification is automatically sent to all the other departments?
All the other departments, yes.
Okay, colleagues, unless you have anything on this, we'll go ahead and receive and file the reports. And if you can just share, again, your action report with us, that would be great. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the cooperation coordination that you guys are having together on looking at what you can do and measures proactively for the future. It's very, very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, our last item is item 3, and this is relative to a report on the the violence at First Amendment events nationwide. And this particularly looks at items being used to cause injury or damage to demonstrators or law enforcement personnel. And we don't have to go far to look at what's happened in some of those efforts and issues in Ferguson and Baltimore, Charlottesville, Oakland, Berkeley, Laguna Beach, et cetera. And so we're looking at best practices. These are rallies and protests, public meetings where these issues have occurred in the past. And I want to thank you for bringing this issue to our attention. And thank you very much, Mr. Green.
I'm going to let Chief Frank start, if you would, sir.
Okay. Good morning, council members. Deputy Chief Horace Frank, Commanding Officer, Counterterrorism Special Operations Bureau. Good morning. One of the things that we have seen over the past several months, actually going back to January since the election, is we have seen an escalation in these protest marches. Some of them have been permitted marches, and some have not been. The injuries have certainly appears to have been going up, and this is nationwide we're talking about. We've seen about 8 of them so far in the 8 months so far into the year. Type of weapons being used, certainly the complexity of those weapons and the types of them are certainly been going up, from Molotov cocktails to baseball bats, sticks, flagpoles, bottles, a lot of bottles with biohazard materials inside of them. We've seen quite a bit of that. The injuries have certainly increased significantly. A lot of arrests, ranging from assault with deadly weapons, vandalisms. Those would be arrested based on, of course, in terms of crimes. The crimes are all along that myriad, and certainly we've seen the unfortunate homicide in Charlottesville a couple months ago. So they've certainly been going up, and we've been certainly paying a lot of attention to them here in the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Chief?
So first, we see an opportunity missed at some of the different cities in the way of prevention. The appropriateness of bringing 2x4s and pipes and hammers and things of First Amendment activity. So as we see this, and we want to paint a picture of what's happening nationwide to give the committee an idea of what's going on and the type of things that we are seeing and the type of violence and vandalism, because it's significant nationwide, to put you in a position to make any requests that you may want for the department.
All right, thank you very much. Colleagues, I've got in having numerous discussions with the departments and chiefs, I want to thank you very much for bringing this here and doing all the work that the departments have done on this. A couple of amendments that we'd like to ask the city attorney to include and add that we move this to council and request the city attorney working with LAPD to prepare and present the draft ordinance to amend LAMC 5507 to include additional prohibited items at demonstrations. These are very similar to what other cities have recently done, including Long Beach and Berkeley. We'd like to add under number 12, we have plastic bottles filled with substances other than juice or water or air. We'd like to amend that to include, the language should be as simple as consumable liquids except alcohol. We certainly don't want to prohibit things like baby formula and bottles for soda, things like that, perhaps. So consumable liquids only, but with the exception of no alcohol. We'd like to add to this prohibited items being pepper spray, tasers, and drones. And we'd like to also amend the actual language being prohibited items at public assemblages and demonstrations should be prohibited items at public meetings, public assemblages, and demonstrations. And then the last question I had on, wasn't sure exactly what we were doing with spray cans, keeping that in there for now or coming back with a draft without it.
So at this point, what we're doing is collecting data, and we'll provide that some recommendations to the city attorney once we have that data about things we're seeing nationally. Sure.
Okay. So the motion the ordinance that will come back to the full city council may or may not include that. Depends on what the data you find is. Okay, we'll keep it open to that then. Colleagues, did you have anything to add to this? No? Okay, then that is approved with those amendments and the instruction to request the city attorney to draft those ordinances with those changes.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. I really, really appreciate it. Last item is a general public comment for issues pertaining to this committee that are not on the agenda. Mr. Previn, for 1 minute.
Thank you. It's Eric Previn from the 2nd District. And I would ask this committee to look into getting a refund from Taser, doing business now as Axon, because as you recall, sir, you were very supportive of that group, and they have been subsequently offering refunds for the body camera program to jurisdictions that opted in. And we certainly did, large. So I think we should circle back and get that money. We could certainly put it to good use. And certainly I'd like to apologize. I never implied that, or I did imply, but I didn't know that filling when there's no relation. But I'm still very concerned about donations, as you've heard me speak about before. And I would ask that this committee look into the possibility of aggregating in one report all of the donations for the LAPD over the last, say, through today's date as a Public Record Act request so that we can vet them for conflicts. I do know that everybody is trying their best, but it's important, and I think the public scrutiny piece helps. And when people are giving, like Rick Caruso on today's agenda is giving $25,000, we just like to know, and we can't speak on it in today's City Council meeting. So that's the reason why.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Herman, general public comment for 1 minute.
When it comes to the concerns of the public, 42 U.S.C. 1983, rules of decorum, fuck your rules of decorum. I'm talking about vague and ambiguous rules that do not apply. Stop discrimination by Herman Jason Weston Jr. tossing, removing, and throwing out public speakers because they put stickers on their cards and he doesn't like them moving around. Well, who the fuck is Herman Jason Weston? He's a fucking tyrant, contemptuous, little hand dick man who has nothing better to do but fuck with his constituents. Herman Jason Weston downstairs, if you're listening,
Okay, that's not on matter pertaining to this.
Police
so that concludes your time because you were off topic
that you
on
cannot
items pertaining to this committee.
and should not violate
Okay, that concludes this meeting. We're adjourned.
NWA, as I put on my card for the record.